This is another video in the series Getting Started with Extreme Vigilance from Scianta Analytics. This video we're going to walk you through the creation of a data dictionary. So let's get started. Under the Manage menu, you will find an item for managing data dictionaries. And we're going to go ahead and select that. It's going to provide you a list of all the data dictionaries that come seated with Extreme Vigilance product suite. And most of these are all based off of data models. Now, if you didn't have the common information model installed, they would not be listed. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to recreate one of these existing ones, but just want to walk you through the steps of it. So let's take like the first one, authentication, which was based off the authentication data model. So I'm going to go ahead and click the create button, and you got to give it a name, and we're going to call it my authentication DD data dictionary. Give it a description too. Data dictionary. There we go. Now you have to select the source. This one's going to be based off a data model, but alternatively you could select an index where you have data. Or you could also create a custom search to extract the data based off of your requirements. Now, initially, since I'm going to go with data model, I want to do the authentication one. So let's go ahead and pick that, authentication. And there's several data model objects, but we're just going to go with the authentication one. The whole idea of the data dictionary is to actually select the right events. So we're going to do a check here. We're going to select the key column authentication.tag, and if its value happens to be authentication, then it will be selected, and we will parse that data into a form that our data models can use. And in particular, it's just telling us how to parse the events and which fields that we want to make available for analysis, and that's what we're doing here. Just a quick check, there is a validate button, so whatever criteria you've entered, and to make sure that there is data and it gets selected correctly, we can press this validate, and it will do a query and show like the first 10 rows or first couple rows. So this is working successfully. Next, the timestamp that you want events to be associated with, typically it's going to be the underscore time with Splunk. That's the time it was ingested, but there may be an alternative time field on there that you want to use. Because the ingestion time is not reflective of the actual occurrence. But in general, it usually is the underscore time field. And by default, in Splunk, it's an epoch, and we will just take the default selections here. If you had picked another source, you may have to put in a format string so we can parse it correctly, because we do everything in terms of epochs in the system. The next, now we need to select the actor. So when events come in, they have to map to an actor, and they may or may not be associated with assets that we're managing too. So by default, we're a little smart with data dictionaries. We can kind of pick out certain fields that we know would contain the actor information. So authentication user. But let's say we also want to track the assets associated with it. So the source asset in the authentication data model is authentication source. The destination is authentication dest. We can go ahead to the next. Now we do everything in terms of actor action process field. That's how we represent information within our model. So we're just going to take a hard-coded value of authentication for the action. Otherwise, we could pick it from a field, but let's do that on the next one for process. We're actually the process is going to be the app, authentication app. So it could be from a desktop, this authentication event, or maybe it's an authentication event associated with a server. But that information will come in and be selected as the process field. Now we can actually go ahead and pick some fields, and we're going to look at the actual action. It could be a login successfully, login failure. Those type of informations are stored in this field in the data model. It's a string field. We already know the data type. And because there's two types of taxonomy here. One is we can just take the field and we're going to just do analysis over the values contained in that field. Alternatively, we want to have a terrain or analysis based off of what's in the field. So field value. As I mentioned, the authentication action might be success. So we're going to go ahead, and since it's Boolean, we're going to start taking counts of every time that occurred. Or maybe the field value actually contains failure or something like that. So we're going to actually track those. So we're going to go ahead and click the Add button, and now I have the field. Now the next step is to actually save the data dictionary. I could add more fields, but we've only done one. So let's just go ahead and save this. And then finally, if I click next one more time, I have a summary of this whole data dictionary definition. The name I gave it, the description. It's based off of the authentication data model object. And there's the criteria for selecting events, the key column name and values. We set the action to be authentication, but there's other fields that we are going to look at. And the one that's most interesting is we're going to do an analysis later on using the authentication.action field. So the actor action process element for this, the actor is going to come from authentication user. The actions is set as authentication. The process is going to be based off of what app was selected here, shown in this line. And then the field, which is going to be the action. Okay, this concludes the creation of a data dictionary. Thank you.